Oh, you all are in for a treat. I think I'm maybe uh, more excited about this. I'm clicking go live on Instagram, which is why I'm filling time. But Tecca Thompson and I think it's a magical meeting, but the amount of love that I have for you, and I think you do for me too, it goes with, it's just crazy. And so, welcome to our live stream, Tecca. And tell us about Tecca Thompson and Sacred Healing Spaces. I'm passing off the baton, girl.
Thank you, Traci. Thank you for having me. So, I am Tecca Thompson. I'm the owner of Sacred Healing Spaces. And Sacred Healing Spaces is a platform where I create spaces of rest, healing, and transformation for Black and women of color, which is kind of where I started. And I do that through embodied practices, breath work, somatics, and storytelling. But quickly after I started my business, it also kind of transformed into this place where I also create the same spaces for community-based organizations and activists, organizers, and crisis workers, pretty much anyone that's working with the people in the margins. So I'm creating supportive spaces for those folks who are working with folks that are in the margins of the margins sometimes. So that's kind of really what I'm doing now. So, yeah.
So, bring us to where you are and where are you located in the world and what called you to this work?
So I'm in Columbus, Ohio, in the United States. And really, what called me to this work was a lot of things. But it was, of course, I started my business during the pandemic. And I had some time to sit and be with Traci and offering that she had during the pandemic, during the time when there was a lot of things going on in the world, socially and racial injustice. And she had put together, it was like a 5 week, maybe 4 or 5 week um, opportunity for folks to come together and just sit in community and listen to one another. It's the first time I had ever experienced anything like that. And through that experience and some other things that I was kind of, playing around with somatics and embodiment, I really wanted to bring uh, deep listening or a sense of being able to listen in community to Black women. And so that's really where that was the little premise of where my business started. And also at the same time, listening to the teachings of the Nat ministry. I was exhausted during the pandemic, like literally so dysregulated by everything that was happening. And I kept hearing this message, go lay down, like go lay down. And one day it just dawned on me that I was, the age that I was, and I had to have permission from someone to lay down. And then I kind of just started resting for my own mental health. And again, so just putting this idea of these concepts of listening and rest together, I wanted to create these spaces for Black women to come into because Black women, all women, walk through the world with ways that we shrink down or, we're taught not to stand up for ourselves, not to use our voices. But because of the intersectionality that Black women, we walk through the world in a really different way. And so I want to create those spaces because I think it's a generous gift to humanity when Black women can come into a space, unfurl, and find their most authentic self, find their gifts, and be able to leave those spaces and offer that to the world. I believe, and I say this all the time, that wherever we are going next as humans, whatever the next, wherever we're evolving to, it's going to take everyone to be in their most fullest, authentic self, operating in the gifts that we've been given to move us to this place that we're going. And so that is really what I do, how it started. One of the reasons why I said yes to be here with you, because, you were just a huge part in creating the foundation to my business and also the offerings that I'm, currently offering to folks. So I love Sidewalk Talk. Happy birthday. So here we are.
Uh, I feel like it's a privilege. You know, the group that we met in was not for Black women. And it was a
Mm,
very controversial group in some ways because we got
mm,
together for 5 weeks right after George Floyd's murder. And it was a
mm,
mixed race group. And it was an interesting experience. And you've described it to me as really important. Um,
mm, mm.
what am I going to ask you about that? I'm still making sense of that group. I'm still making sense of that group. Like sometimes I feel like I'm getting the message we should only be in affinity groups. And sometimes I'm
Mm,
getting the message no, we need both. We actually need affinity groups because there's something that you have with affinity that is beneficial. But then there's also something that you have with um, getting a big, diverse group of people together to listen to each other. And I'm just curious what your experience was like being in a different, diverse group versus the groups that you currently facilitate. Is that okay to take up?
yeah. Um, being in that group, first of all, it just taught me that the value of listening or how important it is just to gather and how that is just wired in our DNA. So it really doesn't matter what you look like or, where you've come from, your ethnicity and, all of the things is that it's wired in our DNA to gather. And so what I learned from that group was it didn't matter as long as there was another regulated nervous system sitting across the screen from me, that I was able to come back into my body. So it really, to me, both groups are needed. For the reasons that I said, it's like there's something that happens when we're in affinity groups together that it allows for an acceleration of healing because we don't have to worry about all of the filters that we bring into other healing spaces. However, and I get this all the time because some folks will be like, you don't create spaces for us. Why not this, and that? And then I have to explain. That's why I say it so eloquently because I explain it all the time. Like this group, my group for Black women is for you. You just can't be in it. It is. The outcome is for you. But to be together in other groups is just, it helps us to one, regulate. It helps us to understand that we're not alone. And it helps us to understand and play together and be together as human beings because we're not going to evolve separately, period, point blank. And we need to learn. And I have a really, really good friend, and you know her as well, Juanita Robinson, and she talks about how we become each other's medicine when we sit together. And it's one of the reasons why I love her so much. You introduced me to her, but it resonates so deeply. Like we really do become each other's medicine. And so it is important that we do sit together in spaces where people don't look like us and don't even believe like we believe. It's in that coming together that we find out that we can be different, but still together.
Oof. There are a couple things that I just want to highlight that feel like such gifts to me that you just said. One, this is for you. You just can't come. So good. This is for you. You just can't come. I mean, in a way, that's what therapy is too. I don't ask you to come to my private one-on-one therapy sessions, but my one-on-one therapy sessions benefit you. I love that. And then I don't know why, but when you said the word gather, there's so many other ways to talk about connection, but that word itself has such a tenderness to it. It
Mm,
really touched me that we need to gather.
mm,
I think of how the mama hen gathers all of her little, we just,
mm.
there's sort of a tending in gathering.
I love that word tending, and it's been like in my vibrational just being. So yesterday, I do create spaces for all women. So I had an all women's circle yesterday. We all came together. So I get slammed so much when I say what
You
I
do?
say. Oh gosh, yes. People just want to know, well, why aren't you creating spaces for everyone? And we don't
Hmm.
need, division. I'm just very used to navigating this conversation. But the word tending to is came up yesterday in our circle, and we really leaned into what does it feel like when someone has tended to you in
Mm.
an unspoken way, right? Like they did something for you, but they didn't say, here, this is a gift for you. And so gathering to me is all about like, how do we tend to one another? How do we tend to ourselves in community? And Circle just ended up being so precious and such a really tender time for us to lean into. Like, how do we let other people tend to our needs, and how do we tend to ourselves? And so I do love the word gather. Let's come together. And sometimes, of course, we're going to listen and be with one another, but sometimes just coming together and sitting and seeing someone else's face and then exhale. It, man, it's medicine. It really is. It really
It's how
is.
I felt when you got on the screen today. When I saw your sweet face, I got all into my doing mode, and then I went, whoa, wait a minute. She's
I
here right in front of
know.
me. And I stopped you and I said, I'm just so happy to see your face.
Uh,
Oh,
I think, Tracy, like, I don't know, you know me, I'm sometimes this big fairy tale person, like literally like we're gonna be talking about rest later, but like and for rest, that topic is really big for some people, but really it's just a pause, just like we did. Let's pause in the moment and acknowledge each other's humanness. And then the memories came in, and then all of those things. But it's not hard. We just have to pause sometimes and just gaze at each other, not in a weird way, but just yeah. And then our hearts know there's another human there, right? We can be human with
yeah.
one another. So it's really
I have to tell you, this quality that you're bringing up is what I am the most grateful to you for, because you remind me of this all the time. I mean, I honestly think I started Sidewalk Talk because this is my medicine, because I forget to pause, right? So it's not that I'm the teacher, it's my medicine that I'm just practicing out in public. And I try to get that through to people. I'm like, I'm not the teacher. I am practicing the medicine that I need to take on the sidewalk for my own spirit. And you are a teacher. I mean, you can feel me across the ether sometimes when I'm not pausing enough, and you'll just send me a text and go, Tracy, how you doing? I'm like, oh man, she knows. And I did have a truth telling session with myself the other night because I really got it in my bones that culturally a lot of us are taught to do all the time. And you've heard doing over being, but I really got it in my bones. I'm like, whoa, this is something our culture passes down to us, to actually treat ourselves like machines of production.
mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. I love the way that we're so connected because just the other day I was thinking, wow, when do you know when you're tired?
Mm.
Right? And it's because we are taught to push past being tired. And so I have a 4.5 year practice of rest. Like I have this cultivated, centered practice. And I was pondering, like, when do we know we're tired? Um, I think that we often know when we're exhausted, but like, when do you know I'm tired? And I think when we first start to notice we're tired, the very first message or story we begin to tell ourselves is, I need to still do. I need to finish the dishes. I need to, whatever, I need to do these things. And um, it's one of the ways that we are incredibly disembodied, right? Because we can't even gauge when we're really tired because we've
Mm-hmm.
really been taught to push past those first inklings of maybe I'm tired. And then I caught myself just pondering that and then saying, oh, you're being lazy, which is something that's a word I haven't used in a really, really long time
Oh,
because I wasn't exhausted, but I was just kind of feeling like, I don't want to do that today. And I think that's the first inkling when we're like tired before we get exhausted. Does that make sense at all?
it makes sense. Now I know why you called me out for saying I don't think you were lazy when I didn't send you the graphic at a time. Here's my challenge with this idea. I'm from
Mm,
California and you're from Ohio.
mm,
Californians are notorious for being flaky. Oh, I just didn't feel like it.
mm,
And I'm trying to figure out that happy medium of being reliable and keeping my word to other humans. I think it comes down to knowing my pacing so I don't overcommit ahead of time. Um, I think people in corporate life are like, oh, all these young kids are coming in and saying they're tired and not getting their work done. How do you balance this? How do you?
mm. Yeah. So I've been thinking about this a lot. So I think too, like rest is so complicated for people, right? It just is because they think it's about sleeping and being lazy and all of these things. But when I was pondering like this, when am I tired? Like it's just like for me, and I don't know how anyone else practices embodiment, but you acknowledge it. Oh, I'm tired. Like you just have this really intimate conversation with your body, like because in the moment you may not be able to rest or you may not be able to take a pause. But I think that when we have these intimate conversations with our body, like, yes, I am noticing that we are tired. Me and you, our body, me, we're tired, right? And we'll tend to that when we can. And we'll find this time where we can really lean into some rest. So we just acknowledge it and then we move on with what we have to do. And if in the moment you can take rest, then you do. But if you can't, then you just acknowledge to yourself, yeah, I noticed that too. It's always the noticing, right? And I believe that we begin to build this intimate trust and safety with our body when we have those conversations because our body begins to trust that we listen to it even though we can't. It's just like I always say, like strong emotions or being tired, just like a 2-year-old child. If you don't acknowledge what it is that they're saying in a way, then they just get louder and louder and louder. That doesn't mean you give them the candy and the popsicle every single time. It just means that you tend to them by acknowledging, like, yes, I hear you, right? But this is what we have to do now. We're on our way to XYZ, right? And so you just tend to it in that way. So you don't always give in to the urge to sleep because we just don't live in a world that we can do that. So I don't know, I'm talking about my own personal beliefs. This is not written down in a
I
book, or
think
maybe
you're
it is
sharing
somewhere.
something meaningful. I'm really, what I hear you saying is an incredible amount of care, an
Mhm.
incredible amount of humanizing yourself. And even if you can't take a nap in that moment, I have to, what came over me as I was listening to you is my whole body just went, I can do that. I can treat myself that way.
Mm.
And then the question arose in me, oh, well, if I start caring about myself that way, I wonder how that ripples out.
Mm. I think that when you show up for other people, you don't have to say much. They feel that you're a person that tends to yourself. And nervous systems begin to talk like, oh, I feel safe with this person. I don't have the language for why I feel safe with this person, but nervous system starts to talk, and your nervous system is like, cool, because we talk all the time. I'm tending to my own nervous system. And so I think they feel that you're a safe person. I think that's what happens. That's how it ripples out.
I'm just feeling an incredible amount of love for you. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
I the other thought that's coming up in me is that I've been having more and more recently, and just talking about all these live streams. Someone, why did you have to do so many? I said, I don't know. Why did I have to do so many? And we were talking about how an important piece of being a contributor to healing and justice in the world is making sure that your pace is tending your nervous system. Because you
Mm-hmm.
could be doing a lot to serve other people, but if you're doing that with a dysregulated nervous system, does it serve? And what I'm kind of getting from what you're saying is, Traci, you might, I mean, this is the medicine I'm taking from what you're sharing with me anyway. I don't know what anyone else will take, but the medicine I'm taking is this. Traci, you might actually serve the world from a regulated nervous system more profoundly than if you were just hustling and doing all this good stuff, but it was like frenetic and ga 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 ga. And I'm taking that in deeply right now. I'm that this was today in particular. I needed to hear this today. It's just going in different. You know how that is. I'm sure I've heard this before, but it's just going in different right now.
And I want to thank you because that's a beautiful reflection because I've been saying out loud lately that that thought and that way of showing up in the world is like literally one of my deepest core values that I truly believe that when we show up regulated for other people, it is the best thing that we can do without even bringing an intervention or all of the things is that when you can show up deeply regulated for someone else, then half the battle or for something else, it may even be a large event or a speaking engagement, because all of that ripples out. Um, that's the best thing that we can offer. It's the best thing that we can offer to humanity, to the world, really. But I believe that so strongly. Mm-hmm.
So cool. Where are you taking us next? We've got rest, we've got
Mm-hmm.
storytelling, we've got sacred healing spaces. I mean, you're a wealth of knowledge.
We can talk about story a little bit. Like it to me,
I
it's
do
all
want
the
to talk about
same.
storytelling because I don't think it's something I've got any training in. So I'm like, learning is my number one core value. So when someone's got something to teach me, I get all.
Well, for me, this is something that happened in the pandemic. Like, so my grandfather was this amazing natural storyteller. He wasn't trained. So I just kind of believe that this thing to tell stories, use our voices in this particular way in my family is something that is in our DNA, right? Like my father was like this great historian. What like he knew all of the historic spots, no matter what city he moved to. After a while, he could tell you about everything in the city, including all of the cool bars and restaurants and all of the things. And he just used his voice in that way. And so I think like it's just in me, but I had a small T trauma when I was 12 years old where I had to tell the Sunday announcements in church and I could not, no words would come out of my mouth and I was humiliated. And it like deeply impacted my ability to one, use my voice, but also use my gift, which was storytelling. So during the pandemic, when we all slowed down, I could just hear like the voice of my grandfather, like, you're supposed to be out here telling stories. So we need to figure this out. So it became a really somatic experience and unpacking. It's really how I was introduced to somatics and then an embodied way of telling stories. Like I had to unpack all of that to find my gift to be able to tell stories. So like I began telling stories from a very kind of same way my grandfather did. Like no one was teaching me how to tell the stories, right? They just came. And then I just started like, everything is about stories, and stories to me is like it's the same as sitting on the sidewalk. When I'm telling a story, it is connecting with someone on a soul level, on a level where their nervous system regulates also. And there's just deep connection in the story. Like, someone could stand up and tell the worst story ever, but even though we're going to like kind of disconnect because they're not pulling us in, there's going to be something in that story that connects with us, right? Because we're all wired through story as well. Like, it's the way our brain works. It's the way that, we were created to sit and listen to stories. And I believe that when folks lean into stories, that it is like right now I'm calling myself like a guardian of oral storytelling, because it's like everyone's doing story in all these different ways, but we have to be able to keep the oral tradition of telling stories, because if technology went away, then how would we remember? How would we connect ourselves back to who we are and who we are going to be through stories? So it's just such an important part of my life. And I just think it's all connected. Nervous system regulation, connection, and story all go together, and breath.
I'm going to ask you a dumb question, though. And sorry if I look distracted. I was yelling at my
That's
children
right.
over text because they got the basketball in the hallway outside my office when I told them I was going to be on. So I was doing a little parenting over text. I'm like, hello. I don't think people know what the difference is between talking about yourself and telling a story. I mean, I don't think I always know, to be honest with you. So when you say
Oh,
it's
you're a
important to
great
read,
storyteller. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
I do like to be the center of attention sometimes. So I've gotten good at telling stories.
Well, like, storytelling is definitely like a crafted thing, but if someone stands up and starts talking about themselves, we count that as story too. But there is an art to telling stories where you actually are crafting it in a way where you want to draw people into and take them along on a ride. And oftentimes when people stand up and they start talking about themselves, folks they'll disconnect from the story because there's these pieces where we're not drawing people in. So there is a way that you are intentionally crafting a story, to bring people along on a ride with you, like you're painting these pictures. And again, it just really speaks to the brain when you're painting a picture, as opposed to, I have this degree and then I went over here and bought 3 bagels. And then I went down the street and I got into a taxi. Like, it's very different when you're painting pictures and putting people inside of your story. So there is a way that you're very intentional about the art of storytelling.
Ooh. Well, and I think what I hear you saying is that you show people who you are rather than tell them who you are.
Mhm.
And it sounds like because that engages not only, I imagine, your body when you're sharing a story, but it engages their body and nervous system too, because they're feeling
Yes.
they feel you more when you tell a
Yes.
story versus when you just give a bunch of bullet points about yourself.
Exactly. And I almost forgot, this part is the most important part. I think people who, don't really know a lot about story is that there is a very important role in story. There are two. There is the storyteller, and then there's the story catcher,
Mm.
which I always start almost every story explaining that we all have a role today, and the catching of the story is almost, or maybe just as important as the telling of the story, because there wouldn't be a story if we didn't have people to catch them, the stories. And the story catcher's role is so important because stories are a gift, right? This is a gift that I'm giving out. And the catcher needs to receive the gift in order to be in your role as the catcher. You have to lean into listening. And that's why I say listening on the sidewalk, telling stories, they just fit together in this way because we have to use the same skills, the same humanity skill set of just listening. And but I think when I introduce it in that way, it kind of heightens this awareness, like we're in this thing together. We're in this story together. I'm not just passively listening. Now I have a role. I have to catch the story, have to hold the gift and bring it in. So
I love that. It makes me want
yeah.
to ask the question to you without revealing anything confidential. What's a story that you've heard from somebody that felt, I don't want to say transformative because that makes it doing, but that just felt like a particularly big gift? And it could be even mundane. I don't know about you, but I've heard mundane stories, but I caught it at a time where I'm like, that little story just
Hmm.
lit me up.
You know, I hear I hear so many stories all the time that just touch me in a way that, like, all the time. I think just yesterday, someone, we were talking about this tending to, and someone was telling a story about how their grandmother used to leave snacks out for them. Right. And so, like, I don't know, like, for folks who do this work of, um, listening to your body, like you'll hear certain things and your whole body will just kind of light up, right? And like, so I was getting all these feels about these snacks that this grandmother left for her granddaughter. And um, it just let me know also that I was right on target with what I wanted to offer around tending to. And I just felt it, which then invited me to say, let's go back and let's do this thing. We're going to practice leaning into the felt sense of our body, and we're going to do it in a different way. We can always say, what does gratitude feel like? What does happiness? But let us lean into what did it feel like when someone tended to you, unspoken, tended to you, and let's feel that in our bodies together. So I think that story yesterday, it was kind of a mundane story, and for many of the women in the circle, it just went whoosh. So we had to slow down and pause. Well, what does it feel like when someone tends to your heart or your belly? So that story was, I can't even describe the way it made me feel, but it was yummy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took me right back to a story in my life of being tended to. And I think my shoulders just dropped 2 inches, just remembering a story, right, of being tended to. I'm like, oh, so nice. So nice.
So I'm going to talk about the conversation lounge just for a second because it
Yeah.
really is a spin off of sidewalk talk, right? Because
Tell me.
that's yes.
The
So
conversation lounge.
the
Just repeating it
conversation
again so everyone gets it.
the conversation lounge is a space that I created after sitting with Traci for a while and becoming friends, and just we always have these really deep conversations, and we'll get on to a session together just to talk, girl talk, and then we always end up in this like really deep exchange of listening and reflecting, and it just happens quite naturally. So after like a period of time of being with her in that way, and learning what I learned in sidewalk talk through the pandemic, which was online essentially, I decided to start a space again for Black women called the Conversation Lounge. And where it was different than sidewalk talk is that we really slowed down. We used interactive storytelling. So there was always a prompt. We gathered in community first. What's going on, y'all? How y'all feeling? The world is crazy right now. And then we had a prompt, and then they would go out into breakout rooms and practice listening to one another in a really deep way, and then reflecting one another, and then switching, and then coming back into community and slowing down to talk about how did that feel to have someone else just really holding space for you in that way. In particular, for us, Black women and women of color, sometimes like this superwoman syndrome, what it does for us in communication is causes us to talk over one another all the time, because in our own lanes, we are the experts, we are the bosses, we are the things. And so when we get together, we were oftentimes just like missing one another, because we kind of jockeying for that space of I am the one, right? So it also gave women a chance to not be any of that. We're just coming together to be. And so definitely that whole entire space was incredibly powerful. It ended up being deeply spiritual and just what folks needed in the moment. And it is definitely because of Sidewalk Talk. It's just a spin-off of Sidewalk Talk, in my opinion. I don't know. But then I had to like take a break from it because I had long COVID and I needed to rest. I couldn't hold the space any longer. I'm thinking about bringing it back though.
I think you're giving Sidewalk Talk a lot of credit, but if it's true, yay. This is, I don't know if you know this. We haven't talked about this, but we just democratically opened up everything. And we just send you, when you sign up, we send you a cheat sheet now and say, go do it. We don't care whose brand you do it under. We don't care what name you do it under. This is how we do it. Go build it. We still give people the chance to sign up and be an affiliated chapter with Sidewalk Talk if they want to. And then we give them lots more how to's and a portal. But because I want more people doing exactly what you did, creating their own thing, doing it however they want. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
So
that
it's
we get more
perfect.
listening out in the world.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The work that you do is so important. Like, just this Sidewalk Talk is just super important. And for folks who are doing it, who've done it in the traditional way, and folks who are now able to do it in the way that I did, this work's so important because it's so accessible, right? It's so accessible to sit down with someone, to pause, and to catch their story or catch what it is that's going on with them. And people don't really realize how important that is to um, witness another person. That's it. Like, I see you, you really do matter. And, just maybe for that moment or for that time, they feel not so much alone. And hopefully folks will get like addicted to it, kind of like we have, and they keep coming back. But the work that, Sidewalk Talk folks are doing is so important because it just reminds us to be human with one another, and it doesn't take a lot. It's so accessible. It's right there. It's just sit, pause, listen,
That's
right?
beautiful. Sit, pause, listen. SPL. And it's so
Yeah.
good for our bones and our nervous system. It's amazing. I can't believe our time we went by so
I
fast.
know. I
Before
know,
we move to
right?
the last little thing, is there anything more that you wanted to share about rest or storytelling? Because we have our little ritual for how we close our time.
What I want to offer about rest is this: like, don't make it so complicated, people. Like, rest is just a pause, and it is like rest right now is like all the hype, and a lot of people then have resistance to it because they don't know how. Yes, you do. Rest is just a pause and 3 deep breaths, refocus and go. It can be that simple. It can be complicated, but don't let it be too complicated. That's
I
all I
don't have to
wanted.
go take a 5 hour bubble bath to rest.
No, no, you don't.
Love it. Love it. Okay, I'm going to hand off the mic and you get to speak yes, partly to me, but to all the people that have ever listened on the sidewalk, which you already kind of just did. But the question is this: what wish or
Mm.
prayer or words of wisdom do you want to speak directly to people who have taken up a lot of time to sit and listen on sidewalks around the world?
Mm. My hope and prayer for everyone who's ever listened or who's doing this work or thinking about doing this work is that you find the resource inside of yourself to keep doing it. That is my hope and wish for you, that you don't get weary of doing this very important work. And there's not enough of us, so we need you to stay resourced. Take care of yourselves. Know that you're worthy for the rest, and also to be witnessed as well, so that you can show up on the sidewalk or whatever platform you're using, in this way that you can continue to do this work. Because so many people feel so alone in the world, and we need all of you sidewalk talk folks to continue this work. So stay resourced and keep showing up. I think that's what I would offer.
Amazing. Tecca Thompson, it's been a gift to be your friend, first of all, but to have you on. And this will go out and be recorded on YouTube, and it'll stay living on Facebook and on LinkedIn, but also it'll come out as a podcast. So you can go in the comments. I'll come in behind and make sure, because Tecca would like to ask. She has a new Instagram account, and she would like you to start following her social media, because she's stepping into the social media world to put her work out there. So I'll make sure and put it in the comments so that folks can find you. And then Sacred Healing Spaces, what's the URL of the website?
It's just sacredhealingspaces.com. It's real
Excellent.
simple. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I do. I'm pausing and looking you in the eyeballs as I say that. I'm going to end now.